Hi, so no photon left behind, carrying on with some more opening up in Fiji. This time we're going to open up a structure illumination reconstruction data set from the Delta Vision. And it will look like it's a QuickTime movie on most things, but it's not actually for QuickTime. Let's go ahead and open it up, and we're going to try colorize here, so get it to pull in the colors from the metadata. And it works for majority of files. That's one of the better options. It looks like it's done it pretty well. We've got the green in the right place and the red and the blue. We've just got a little bit of nucleus on that side there. And so we're going to do some adjustment on the color here with the image adjust brightness contrast again. There are some subtleties with structural illumination microscopy data sets in terms of what you should display and shouldn't display. There's always going to be some artifact in the image, so I'm just going to highlight how to think about those artifacts there. And what we're going to do is quickly have a look at the histogram. So analyze, control and H brings up the histogram options, and you kind of just go with the default. It calculates the minimum, maximum, and I turn off the stack histogram, so we're going to look at different Z stacks independently. So let's just go with that without stack selected. And here's our histogram window, and you can pick log. Log makes life easier. Things should always be in a log histogram. And then live, it updates it as you change it. So now I can see different Z stacks. You see it will change the maximum value. As I go through the Z stacks, you can kind of see what's in the histogram by the shape of it. If I go to the most detailed point, you can see that most of the shape of this curve is going to be the data, and we see a little bit of the back here, which is going to be background and some artifacts. So we can look at the histogram to think about where to set and how to not have artifacts showing. If I come down to here, you can start to see some reflections here of some of a slight oil mismatch in my data set, and you can see in the histogram we have these separate bumps. This last part is going to be the data that we want, and these other parts are going to be artifacts. You can also just find some definite artifacts and then back them off in the contrast. So let's zoom in. I use the plus and the minus keys to zoom in and out. You can hold down spacebar and move around, and let's move the slider up and down, and we can see these two strong lines coming down here. For example, as we go above and below, we're going to see some sort of rings coming out. I'm going to make the contrast terrible to make this look really bad, so let's just move that up to a really bad position, and then we'll look at these saturated lines now, and as we go either side we start to see these repeats and ring structures coming out around it. So they're what we want to get rid of. So we know that these are not real. So looking at a histogram there, it's probably going to be a good part of this in this particular image is going to be a non-real, the artifacts we don't want. So if we grab our contrast, we can move that up to a point where it starts to back out there, and then when we come up to the image we want at the better layout, we can then change the other end. We can maybe see a small amount here on this screen here. I can just back that off like that, and then the real data is more apparent through the excuse me, through the Z stack. Let's zoom out again, and now when we go up and down, we can see this is just the real data, and then the shadows and the artifact is still a little bit left at that end, a little bit left at that end. So you can kind of just crop off the far ends, and it's kind of symmetric, and that's what we would expect to see. The more symmetry we see in these artifacts, the more we know we're closer to the right oil. And so that's for the green. We kind of backed off the contrast there. Let's go to our red. I always, with super res, make it look terrible and then back off and have a look. Let's zoom in on some of this. Have a little bit of honeycombing going on and a few kind of rings coming out and around. Sometimes you can see in hexagonal ring structures. It's a little bit more difficult when you have some random shape structures. When you have puncture, it makes life easier to see what's artifact and what isn't. So we go to the brightest level, and as we move a couple of levels up, we can start to see these shadows of the data sets either side. The oil's a little bit less symmetric on the red. You're going to find one of them is going to be a little bit better matched. It's hard to get right in between. So there's our real data about here. There's a bright structure at the top here, for example. If we go a few clicks away, you can start to see this is a set of artifacts. So I can bring my contrast to the point where these disappear. and then go back to where the real data is, and then set the contrast to be something a little bit more reasonable. Okay, so let's zoom out again. Like that, really a little bit less contrast there. There we go. Okay. And so let's do Control Shift and Z for our overlay, and we'll do a composite. And now we can start to see our composite of the super res microscopy there. And we can change the contrast to show what we need to show.